Hello, I'm David Hunt, and on today's show we've got a man who is just such a nice person that from the very first time when I met him I thought he's a good guy, but he also has got a very important job. I am talking about the Mayor of Stonnington, Stephen. Hello. Steve or Stephen?
Steve is fine, David, thank you.
Or Stephen when your mother isn't happy.
Correct, that's right.
Now, your surname is?
Stefanopoulos.
Which is a nice
Greek name.
Your name can't be Steve.
You're being very cheeky, David. I like this. Well, I was christened as Stavros, right, and I was never called it. Even my mother never called me that. It was always Steve or Stevie or Stephen if I was in trouble.
It's a name that is used so much here, especially here in Melbourne, because of all the Greeks that are here.
True, and being the largest Greek community outside of Greece, I mean, where else would you find a Stavros outside of Greece but here in Melbourne?
Were you born here in Melbourne?
Of course.
Yep. What was it like growing up in a Greek family in a city where, you know, like you weren't alone?
No, weren't alone, and being in a multicultural sort of community, which is great in Melbourne. My cousins lived down the road. Mum's brothers both lived. One lived in Armidale. We lived in Melbourne. Another uncle lived in Melbourne, and we always got together as family. And there was always an extended family for Easter and Christmas and name days and all that sort of stuff. And lots of Greek food, of course.
And were they born in Greece, your parents?
Yes. So my parents were born in Greece.
Yep.
Immigrated separately in the mid-60s.
Oh, so they met here.
They met here.
Right.
And then they had my older brother in 1969. Then I was born in 74.
Right. What was it like for you? As a kid growing up with all your Greek rallies, and did you try to push the Greekness away, or did you embrace it?
I didn't push it away, but I didn't necessarily embrace it. I went to Greek school right through. So from when I was 5, I was going to school, Monday to Friday at my normal primary school, and then on Saturday morning for about 4 hours, I was subjected to going to Greek school, and sometimes it was a bit of a subjected, because I didn't want to go to school on a Saturday. Who would want to?
Well,
when all my other classmates at school never went. Although I went to a multicultural school, so I had lots of different nationalities, I think I probably was the only Greek for a couple of years.
What did you learn at Greek school on a Saturday afternoon? What was it? Greek history, like language?
A bit of everything. So you learn how to read, you learn how to conjugate verbs, and I'm excellent now at conjugating verbs, thanks to my Greek school teacher, who I've now recently met again.
Oh, lovely.
And she became one of our Stonnington Citizens of the Year last year. And it was quite a shock that she was nominated, and then we gave her the award. And she was the one that made me understand verbs and how to conjugate verbs in Greek, and thus I can conjugate them in any language. I can do, Italian and French and do it really, really well. And
do you speak to your parents in Greek?
This is funny because my generation in Australia, we call it Greeklish. So a bit of Greek and a bit of English, and it depends on the emphasis that you want to make. So sometimes it's better to say the word or the words in Greek, or sometimes in English. And I never speak a fluent Greek sentence, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, so it's a pigeon way of speaking.
Yeah. And Mum does the same with me. Yeah. She learned when she was back in Greece, she went to English classes before she came to Australia.
Did you have grandparents here as well?
No grandparents.
Do you ever go back to Greece for a holiday, or?
Yeah, I've been about 3 times back. Met my uncle, my mother's younger brother, who we had lost contact with about 6-7 years ago. Yeah. And he has a son my age and a daughter slightly older than me. And we had lost contact, and I went onto Facebook and trolled everyone, and I knew what his name was, and I messaged everyone in Greece with that surname and that first name, and after about 20 hits I had someone message me back and say, I think we might be related. Right. And then I went, well, your uncle should be this and your aunt should be that, and these are your cousins, and then the answer came back, yep, we're related, we're first cousins.
So what was school like for you as a kid growing up?
Well, it was great because for 13 years I walked to school because school was up the road. And I went to a Catholic primary school and was taught by the Brigidine sisters.
Hold on, Catholic primary school and you're Greek?
Exactly, I know. But my parents wanted a good Christian education and didn't want me to go to the local state school. And the Catholic school was better at that time. And so Mum and I walked to school every day for 13 years. So even when I was in year 12, Mum and I walked to school. And I remember at the beginning of every year, the boys at school, because then I went to a Catholic secondary school for boys only. And at the beginning of the year, all the boys would always say, "Oh, you know, you're a mummy's boy, you're walking to school. Why are you walking to school with mum?" And I'd say, "Well, mum can't jump on the tram to go to work in town because the tram is packed with you guys on it." So we would walk up to school, the boys would get off the tram, mum would get on the tram, get a seat and get to work. And loved it. Yeah, it was really, really good.
You didn't mind her walking to school with you?
No, it was fine. Mum and I got along really well. We still do.
Yeah.
And yeah, she was fine.
Because a lot of kids, you know, like they don't want their parents anywhere near school or...
Well, that was at times. There were times where you'd go, "Mum, no, can you just leave me alone? Oh, I'll walk to school on my own." And there were some times when mum would work from home. So there were a couple of years mum worked from home and never walked with me. So
After school, as in, you know, after year 12, what did you do?
well, that was interesting. So I did 5 years of university studies. So I went and did a Bachelor of Teaching Primary and qualified as a primary school teacher. I then did a graduate diploma in Archives and Records Management at Monash. And I then did a graduate diploma in Planning and Design, Architectural History and Conservation at the University of Melbourne.
Okay, in other words, you didn't really know what you wanted to do?
Well, I did, but I just wanted to do all of these things together. And then it was about maybe 5 or 6 years later, I went back to Deakin and did a graduate diploma in museum studies. So I'm a primary school teacher, an archivist, a records manager, an architectural historian and a museum curator. And I do the whole lot in my normal job.
What's your normal job?
Well, I work at Loreto Mandeville Hall, Girls' School in Toorak, as their Heritage Collection Records Manager.
Oh, brilliant.
As their Archivist Museum Curator.
Yeah.
And there's also an amazing 19th century mansion on the property, which I manage the conservation, restoration of it and the day-to-day operation of it.
Where did the love of all, you know, like history come from? Was it doing that Greek school on Saturday?
No, that was my nightmare. No, it was my interest in local history. I loved where I lived. I grew up in Melbourne, and I loved the history and the architecture in the area. I got involved in the local historical society very early on, and I think I was doing an assignment in secondary school or first year uni or something, and that's how my connection began.
What about coming out? You know, like what was that process like for you, and when did it happen? Was it at school or was it later in life?
Well, it's interesting. I have never come out as such. So, and I say that to people that you do whatever makes you feel comfortable. And I do that almost every day or every week. When I meet people, I introduce myself and I might say, "Hey, this is my husband Craig." And if I get a strange reaction, it's not my reaction, it's their reaction, it's their issue. And most of the time people don't bat an eyelid, which is great. There's not an assumption anymore that there might have been maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Did you go out in the scene a lot growing up?
I had lots of straight friends when I was growing up, so we hung around together as a group, and even at university there was a group of us, there were 5 of us together, and we hung around together, and there weren't many gay people that I knew at the time. Coming from Melbourne, coming from a Catholic primary and secondary school, there weren't many of us there.
Oh, there would have been.
There would have been, yes. There were teachers I remember vividly who, in retrospect now, I realise were great role models for me. And later in life, I made contact with them and thanked them.
Your partner, where did you meet? Because he's not from this part of the world.
No, Craig's South African. We actually met on Facebook. We became Facebook mates, and he was living in Perth and I was in Melbourne, and I don't know how we connected on Facebook when we started chatting, and then he wanted a job on the East Coast and eventually got one and moved over to Melbourne.
When you first met him, how did that meeting go? You know, like you obviously had been communicating on through social media.
Yep.
Was there sparks when you first met?
Because we were older, we knew what we wanted. And so when we were chatting, it was quite relaxed and open and honest. And that's what made us click and connect, which was great. And then I flew over to Perth, met him, and then he flew over to Melbourne and stayed in Melbourne, and then c'est la vie.
You're married?
Yep.
But you didn't marry once marriage equality came through here in Australia?
No, so we got married in 2009 in South Africa. So Craig and I went back to, he went back to his hometown, and we got married in Cape Town.
And did your family go?
No, it was just funny story, because it was my sister-in-law, so Craig's brother's wife, who we had told we wanted to do this before we travelled over there, but it was just far too difficult to arrange it from Australia. And she knew we were wanting to do this, and she said, "Look, leave it with me and she'll arrange it." And then one day she said, "Oh, we're going to go see this gentleman down the road." And I said, "Okay." So we all followed suit. It was just Craig and myself and Craig's brother and sister-in-law, and we went to this vicar's house, and on the billiard table at the back is where the ceremony took place. We were just wearing t-shirts and shorts, and that was it, quite relaxed.
Wow, fantastic.
And we started giggling throughout the whole ceremony. We couldn't believe what was happening.
Have you thought you might want to renew the vows that back here in Australia?
No, we haven't, no. And it's interesting because we get asked, are you going to get married again? And I said, well, we are married.
Yep.
And I say, well, look, if you got married in Australia and you moved to the US or the UK or some other country around the world, would you get married again? And the answer would be no. So why would I? And I understand the difference between renewing a vows and getting married. But no.
Yep. Moving forward, you're the mayor of Stonnington. When did all this come about? When did you want to be a councillor?
I had run for council probably in the early noughties, so about 2001, 2 or thereabouts, and didn't get in. A couple of unsuccessful attempts, which was fine.
But why did you want to do local government?
Because I was interested in the local community and I wanted strategic long-term planning, and I think that's what we lack in government, whether it's state, local or federal government. It's the long-term vision that we're missing, and I want to know what the ultimate goal was, consult on that goal, make a decision and go for it. Don't procrastinate. You don't have to consult till the cows come home. Just make a decision and go for it. And that's what I think we were lacking at that time.
You failed the first
couple of times.
So why did you get through eventually?
Good question. Clearly I was out there more, speaking to people, communicated a lot more, lots of posters, lots of flying. I mean, I went through probably half a dozen shoes, walking, letterboxing everywhere.
And how did you find that? You know, like, was it hard? Walking up, knocking on someone's door or handing out flyers in the street?
It can be rejectful because you can get people who just say not interested, no, or they think that you're aligned to a political party and I'm not, never been a member, not intending to be a member.
So you're independent.
Pure independent.
Yep.
And when standing at a train station handing out flyers and people look at you saying, no, I'm not interested, no, I don't want anything to do with politics, no. And trying to reaffirm that I'm an independent, I'm here to listen, provide your views on what the issues are. They can listen, they tend to listen.
I think it's that people's general reaction, they just want to push away from something, because I know I do it. But I think with an area that you were involved in, I thought the people would have been more open to talking to somebody that might be their local councillor. Most
people aren't interested in local politics. They forget to vote. They don't think it's compulsory to vote.
And it is.
It is. It's compulsory to vote.
Yes.
You have to vote, otherwise you get a fine, and we get that revenue. So I think a couple of elections ago we made about $200,000 from fines, which is great. But on average we get about 55% of the population voting, which is really disappointing. But unless it affects them directly, they aren't interested. They won't vote. They were not interested in local government.
But then they'll complain to their neighbours and all that about, the rubbish not being picked up.
Or the street not being clean, or the development happening next door, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. It's that whole thing. Australians are very much like that, aren't they? So what was it like once you got on, council? Was you like a duck in a pond? It
was really eye-opening. Like when you're trying to figure out what the hell's happening around you, all the different personalities of all the councillors, let alone all the staff, and there are about 600 staff. You're there managing a budget of about $100 million in capital works annually, $1 billion worth of assets. You're there responsible to the Minister of Local Government. So it's a big responsibility, and you have to be at council meetings, you have to listen to the community, and it can be difficult.
As a councillor, you're not full-time?
No, not as a councillor, no. And
how much time are you there, or is it mostly your own time?
It's mostly your own time. So you couldn't survive on the salary that you get, or the allowance, which is about $25,000 a year. And I had one constituent who said to me, well, why aren't you working full time as a councillor? And I said, well, I couldn't survive on $25,000 a year as a wage.
Yeah.
And then they still rejected my argument back, so which is quite bizarre. But It can take a couple of hours sometimes, or it can take 10 to 15 or 20 hours a week. It depends on the meetings, schedules. We meet every Monday at Stonnington in the evenings from about 5 onwards. And then there might be meetings throughout the week, possibly on weekends, ringing constituents, answering emails at all hours of the day and night. So it's different being the council as opposed to being the mayor.
Moving forward, you're the mayor. This is your second
consecutive year.
How is it?
It's great. Loving it. It's full on, and I say to people, you can either make it as busy as you like or as quiet as you like. And I'm one of those people who just goes for it and engage with anyone who's interested, speak to anyone who wants to. My mobile number's on the council website. People ring me and they sometimes say, I'm surprised that I actually got through. And I said, well, what would you expect? Oh, I expected it to go to an answer machine and then you never call me.
Yeah.
But I'm not like that. I think of it myself as if it was me in their shoes, I would hope that someone would pick up the phone, and if not, they would call me back. And it's a full-time role as far as I'm concerned. With the City of Stonnington, with inner city council like that, with about 125,000 people, a huge arts program, sporting facilities, lots of lobbying happening at state and federal government, lots of capital works occurring, a big budget to manage. You have to be there, all day, every day.
Normally, a mayor's run is just 1 year,
Correct.
12 months. You put your hand up for a second year, and I remember speaking to you on Joy, and you said, I'm going to put my hand up for a second run, and you got it. Why? Why did you want to do it for more than 1 year?
12 months is not a long enough stint.
No, of course it isn't.
You start and then suddenly it's over and you've realised what the hell was happening, and then you have to stop and you have to get off the bike and move on. And I think a bit of continuity is important, but also changing the culture so that as far as I was concerned, I had to bring the rest of the councillors with me on the journey, uplift them, give them responsibility, see them as my equals, because we are. I have no more authority than any of the other councillors. And also engage with them. Make sure that they're involved in the process. There's no point in me sitting high on the hill and overlooking everyone else and ignoring everyone else's issues and complaints. So it's about listening and giving them some chance to speak and be champions of different ideas and projects and issues that they value or that they're more expert in than I am.
Would you do a third term? Can you do a third?
You can do as many years as you like.
Yep.
So Bernadine Voss is a good friend of mine. She was the mayor at the City of Port Phillip for 3 years consecutively. I think 3, maybe 4 even. So it can happen. It's very rare. Most of the time they come and go. So you might do 1 year, have a break for a couple of years and come back again.
Ah, okay.
So that happens more often than not in Victoria.
Would you like a third term?
Why not? Yeah.
You mentioned it, and I wanted to touch on it because it's a big part of Stonnington. Is the arts.
Yes.
And of course the area that it's in, all those wonderful festivals you do, and then the carols, and then the jazz and opera in the park. It's fantastic what goes on in your neck of the woods. You must be excited about that.
It's really fantastic. So from the end of about September right through to March, it's full on. So it's either carols or jazz. So at the moment we're about to go into the Jazz Festival, the only pure Australian jazz festival program that we have in the country. We do opera in the park in the round, and last year we had about 5,000 people in the park, which is our biggest number ever. We do symphony in the park with our own symphony orchestra, and that was about almost 5,000 people again, the largest number we've ever had. We do Broadway with Rob Mills we had last year, and he was great, Millsy, on stage. And lots of major events. Carols is fantastic as well at Como Park, and every year the mayor has a choice of charity. So last year it was Kids Undercover, because I wanted to give some money back to kids. And the previous year it was the Pride Centre, and that raised the largest amount ever of about $10,500.
What is it about that neck of the woods and the arts? Because the most famous venue is Chapel Off Chapel, of course, known throughout the city. It plays such an important role, doesn't it, in the culture of Melbourne? It
does, and Chapel Off Chapel is a great sort of hub for a number of community events. So we piggyback on Midsummer, on the MQFF, which you just had in the City of Stonnington for the first time ever. The comedy festivals coming up soon as well, which we're having in Chapel Off Chapel as well. Lots of existing Melbourne events are also held there, as well as our own programming.
And you have the Cabaret Festival.
The Cabaret Festival, of course, is also at Stonnington.
Which is exclusively to Chapel Off Chapel, isn't it?
Correct, yep.
It's the people that live in that part of the world, I suppose, isn't it? But you're also bringing in people from everywhere else.
Yeah, and when we do these surveys, and I did that when I was at our outdoor events, I asked people, where are you from? And they're coming from as far away as almost Box Hill and Newport in the west, Essendon in the north, Brighton in the south. So they're coming from everywhere just to come to a Stonnington event. And we also provide funding for our arts programs. So we have about $150,000 to $200,000 of cash and in kind that we offer every year to artists, whether it's a visual or performing arts. It could be running a new arts program for kids, or it could be an event at Chapel Off Chapel or some other activity.
Your husband, you wouldn't see him very often, would you?
No, and sometimes we have to sort of calendar invite each other to make sure that we're going to be at home at the same time. So we message each other and say, we're going to be home tonight, yes or no?
Yeah.
And so we can sync our calendars.
Steve, thank you so much, Mayor of Stonnington, for being on the show today. I'm David Hunt. We'll see you soon.